Let's talk about the CPI print that we got today on December 13th, 2022. And we got the CPI this morning. It came out at 7.1%. It was lower than estimates. I think the estimate was maybe 7.4, 7.5. And what was interesting is that a lot of people believe that was what I would call bullish information. And that's unusual because it's still 7.1%. However, we're in a market now to where we've been getting bad news all year, where any slight moderation or anything that's going to be kind of maybe lower than expectations is now being perceived as bullish. And it has a lot to do with the way the market is designed. This is a passive wealth market. What do I mean by that is that the only way you're supposed to get rich is to give somebody else your money, let them manage it on your behalf, and you sit back passively. For that to work, the market has to keep going up because there's nothing else you're supposed to do in regards to your money. So this is a passive wealth market that we've built inside the United States from an equity standpoint. Not talking about my real estate people, but I'm talking about from an equity standpoint, not talking about my business people. As a result, when we have this 12-month downturn of the market, they have to continue to communicate to clientele that the best thing for you to do is keep your money in the market because the market will turn around because there's really nothing else you can do. If you're in real estate and you're having a volatility in the market or the market's not going the way you want it to go, you can maybe do something about it. If you're running a business, there's no way in the world I would run a business and have somebody tell me, well, David, we have not made money over the past 12 months. And all we can do is continue to sink money into the business. My question is, when are we going to start making money? Now, I'm not talking about a startup business. I'm talking about an established business. We go on a 12-month run in which we don't make any money. However, in the equities market, because we're in a passive wealth system where the average worker is supposed to get rich in this market by giving their money to somebody else to manage, and they just work to create the money for somebody else to manage, and they get rich passively, which is what they're communicated to. When we have this 12-month downturn in the market, they have to take any news and try to make it look positive because they need to keep people in these funds. Therefore, now today, a 7.1% CPI print is seen as positive because it's lower than the 7.5. Okay? Reading it, the index for shelter was the largest contributor to the monthly all items increase, and it offset the decreases in the energy indexes. So the food index increased 0.5% over the month, with the food at home index rising by 0.5%. The energy index decreased 1.6% over the month as the gasoline index, the natural gas index, and the electricity index all declined. The index for all items less food and energy rose 0.2% in November after rising 0.3% in October. So that is a decrease. And the indexes for shelter, communication, recreation, motor vehicle insurance, education, and apparel were among those that increased over the month. It's interesting that motor vehicle insurance went up. Indexes which declined in November include the used car, trucks, medical care, and airline fare indexes. And I think it's very interesting that used cars has gone down. And let's go ahead and look at the chart. So we'll just look at it from October to November. We see food at home went up slightly, but we see food away from home went down. Looking at energy, big decreases in energy. Now we're going to stop right here. To me, what's carrying this and what allowed us to get a lower print was the fact that energy went down. Now they pull out energy, but rising energy impacts everything across the board. It impacts services, it impacts manufacturing, things of that nature. Because rising energy increases the cost of doing business, which means that business owner often pushes that cost onto the consumer, which makes everything more expensive. However, we're in an environment to where if China decides to open back up their economy and they start going back full bore, in my opinion, that can raise energy prices. Now, we may not see that until after the first of the year. Right now, they're going through some pandemic issues. Their economy is not really operating at full speed. However, if they open up their economy again in 2023, their economy starts going back to full speed. What it can potentially do now is start to raise the demand for energy, which will raise energy costs. We know we have the issue with energy between the West, United States, and Russia. We can get a larger demand on energy that can raise energy costs, which means what? It'll now start to raise inflation across the board for everybody. Also, another scenario, if China decides to further restrict their economy, which means they're going to further restrict their manufacturing. They're our largest manufacturing partner for the United States, which means we could have another supply chain issue, which means what? The money that is still left in the economy. There was an economist that came on television, I want to say yesterday. They believe that the average American citizen has 3 months of savings still left in the bank. We talked about before, the goal is to get you to use up those savings. However, if China decides to really restrict their economy, which means they're going to start restricting their manufacturing ability, which means we have that money chasing fewer goods because they're not being manufactured and sent over here, that could also raise inflation. And we have to understand that just because we're getting a lower print now, it does not mean if things change in the new year, 2023, that inflation may not spike back up. And as a result, the Fed could be caught on their heels because they were going into a stage where we think we have a handle on inflation, but because of what's going on around the world, it ramps back up. The Fed cannot impact supply chain issues. They can only impact demand, but they can't do anything about supply chain, and supply chain can rise inflation. I would say that the energy print was able to bring the CPI number down. Let me say it that way. What I also see is that new vehicles went down. Also, again, used cars. That can impact the automotive market. So people that are looking at companies like CarMax, looking at companies like Hertz, looking at companies like Avis, also Tesla, also any of the other car manufacturers, we're seeing is that it's becoming, there's less and less demand on those cars, which means what? The prices may have to start going down because prices for new and used cars has been extremely high over the past 2 years. And we're going to start to see that the consumer is going to be less willing to pay those prices. And then what you're going to have is more inventory than demand, which means the prices may have to go down. And also we see that shelter, and we see the transportation services and the medical care services. What we're seeing today is that the market came out very bullish and then it sold off the rest of the day. And to me, it's because 7.1 is not a great number. The goal is to be at 2%. 7.1 is well off of 2%. Many people are projecting that we'll be at maybe 3% at the end of 2023. However, we talked about before, there's a lot of extenuating circumstances on the global level that cannot allow us to get back to that number because of the way in which our economy is constructed. We don't manufacture the majority of things that we consume inside the United States. Therefore, if our manufacturing partner starts to contract manufacturing, we're still going to have the demand for those goods. We won't have them because of a contraction in manufacturing. Means what? It can bring inflation up because you're going to have those dollars chasing less goods. Same thing. If our manufacturing partner decides to go full bore in their economy, they start drawing more demand on energy. But there's only a certain amount of energy in the world at any given time. Speculators are now going to start to forecast that energy demand will go up, in my opinion. What can that do? That can raise the cost of energy, which will raise inflation across the board. The easiest way for us to solve this inflation problem is for us to produce as much energy as possible inside the United States. They're not going to do that because the energy producers don't want to kill their own market, right? So as a result, we're going to be dependent upon how other people produce energy. And it's not this argument for energy independence. People that say that really don't really understand what they're talking about. We sell a large amount of energy that we produce inside the United States to people outside of the United States. This idea that we import all our energy is false. We sell a lot of the energy that we produce. However, if we were to produce more energy, it could solve the inflation problem because what it would do is it will lower the energy costs across the board. However, the energy producers have no desire to destroy their own market for energy. They're not going to do it, right? Because they could have done it at any time. They're not going to destroy their own market. So we're dependent upon how other people produce energy to really try to factor in how that's going to impact our economy, also impact our inflation. So it just gives you something to think about. But I want to really encourage you to be very pragmatic in how you perceive these numbers. Because again, we're in a passive wealth economy. The only way for the average worker to become successful and to become rich in our economy is to hand their money over to somebody else that has been produced by their labor and to believe that they have a system to make them wealthy in 35, 40 years. And the only way that happens for the majority of people is if the market keeps going up. If the market's not going up, there is no mechanism that they have to make that person wealthy. So they have to continue to communicate to people that the market is going to go up. Well, it went down this week, but it's going to go up. Well, it went down this week. We're at the bottom. Well, it went down this week. Well, time in the market beats time in the market. They have to continue to create the narratives because the mechanism that they're in only works if the market goes up. Hope you got some value from it. David W. Williams, talk to you later.